You smell it before you see it, the faint sweetness of jasmine, thickened by candle smoke and the breath of 100 unseen watchers. The air is too still, the silence too deliberate. You are not stepping into a palace. You are being absorbed by it, swallowed whole by gold, protocol, and fear. Before we uncover the hidden machinery of the emperor's inner chambers, take a moment to join our journey through the shadows of history. If you find stories like this as haunting as they are fascinating, consider leaving a like and subscribing. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always amazed that from Cairo to Calgary, from Manila to Madrid, we're unraveling the lost rules of empires together, bound by the same curiosity for what history tried to hide. Inside the Forbidden City, nothing is ever accidental. The polished stones beneath the girl's silk slippers were laid so precisely that even her smallest step echoes like a confession. The walls, painted in imperial yellow, seem to pulse with the heartbeat of 1,000 years of obedience. Above her, lanterns swing gently from carved beams, their glow catching on the gold-threaded dragons that coil along the ceiling. Every surface glimmers, but none of it feels alive. The beauty of this place is a mask, and behind it lurks a system designed to turn people into ornaments. The girl is 15. Her name has already been shortened to a number. Behind her stands an old eunuch, his expression unreadable beneath the sheen of candlelight. His hands are tucked into his sleeves as he whispers, "From this moment, you belong not to yourself, but to heaven's son." He gestures down the corridor where dozens of other girls once walked, though few ever returned. The words are ritual, but his tone carries the faintest tremor of pity. The architecture of the harem was itself a mechanism of control. Corridors were deliberately narrow, so that those who entered felt compressed, physically reminded of their place beneath the weight of the dragon throne. Every threshold required permission to cross. Even the emperor's sleeping chambers were layered like concentric traps. The hall of mental cultivation, the palace of tranquil longevity, the hall of eternal harmony, each one separated by gates guarded by eunuchs who memorized not faces, but ranks. The eunuchs were the silent architects of fear. Castrated as boys, trained in servitude, they were the only men allowed near the concubines. Their loyalty belonged not to the women they tended, but to the institution itself, a system that rewarded secrecy and punished compassion. They controlled every access point: food, letters, appointments, and even the candles that lit the emperor's bedchamber. Rumors whispered that some could read a person's fate from the rustle of silk or the tilt of a bow. When the emperor desired company, the ritual began hours before sunset. Servants poured water into bronze basins carved with lotus petals. A eunuch announced the hour, striking a bell so pure and high that it seemed to slice through the air. The chosen concubine was bathed in water infused with sandalwood and orange peel, then wrapped in robes of vermilion and white. Her hair was pinned with jade. Her body, inspected by 3 attendants to ensure no hidden weapon or poison touched her skin. Every step was observed, every breath recorded. But beneath the layers of ceremony was a trembling truth. The emperor himself was afraid. Surrounded by wives, mothers, ministers, and spies, he slept in a fortress of silk yet could never be sure who approached him in the night. Assassins once hid among dancers, concubines had smuggled in poison on their tongues. So he built a world where intimacy became surveillance. To look at him, to speak before being spoken to turn one's back, all could mean death. There is a record from the reign of Emperor Yongjing, who ruled in the early 18th century, describing an unnamed concubine punished for turning incorrectly while pouring wine. The chronicler writes only, "She moved as though unmindful of heaven's gaze." No name, no burial place, just the erasure that followed a single misstep. And yet, in this same world of suffocating rules, small rebellions bloomed in secret. A glance held one beat too long, a poem embroidered into a sleeve, a tear shed not for sorrow but defiance. These were the quiet ways women reminded themselves they still existed, Even the palace architecture seemed to conspire against memory. Windows were covered with silk screens that blurred the outside world into watercolor. The women within could see light, but never sky. The emperor's footsteps echoed through the corridors like approaching storms, unpredictable, capable of destruction or mercy. The eunuchs learned to read those steps. A heavy tread meant irritation. A pause meant suspicion. Those who served him too long grew pale, their expressions drained of all emotion, like statues carved to bear witness to other people's power. There is a story, half legend, half truth, of a eunuch named Cheng, who once guided a trembling concubine through the imperial corridor at midnight. When she faltered, he whispered, "Do not fear the silence. Fear the sound of your own heartbeat. It is the only sound that betrays you." The girl survived that night, but Cheng was never seen again. Some said he spoke too kindly, others that he knew too much. His disappearance was not recorded. It did not need to be. In the Forbidden City, absence was its own language. The deeper one moved into the harem, the less the world resembled reality. Rules were not written but memorized, passed from one trembling servant to the next. A concubine learned to walk without turning, to breathe without noise, to smile without showing teeth. She learned to measure time by candle lengths and whispers. The eunuchs, in turn, learned to move like shadows, neither male nor female, neither alive nor dead in the eyes of the empire. Together, they formed a fragile ecosystem of fear, devotion, and performance. And yet, within this golden cage, the illusion of peace reigned. The emperor's chamber smelled of lotus oil and sandalwood. His robes shimmered like dawn. To outsiders, it was paradise, the heart of celestial order. But beneath the surface, every gesture was a calculation, every sigh a strategy. The harem was not a sanctuary of beauty. It was an empire of silence, where even love was dangerous and obedience was an art form. Outside, the night deepens. The corridor stretches endlessly, each lantern reflected in the polished floor like a trail of false stars. The young girl follows her guide deeper into the labyrinth, her reflection fractured and multiplied by the lacquered walls. Somewhere ahead waits the emperor, or perhaps only his absence. The doors close behind her with a whisper that sounds almost human. And in that sound, half sigh, half warning, the palace begins to breathe. The golden lamps burn low, their wicks floating like drowned stars in shallow bronze bowls. A silence settles over the women assembled in the inner chamber, a silence so complete it seems to listen. Incense smokes in layered veils, twisting through the latticework and catching the sheen of silk sleeves that tremble ever so slightly. Outside, the world sleeps. Inside, time bends toward one man. They have been preparing since dawn. The attendants have bathed them in chrysanthemum water, brushed their hair until it shone like lacquer, and rubbed their arms with powdered jade to cool the skin. But beauty here is not for pleasure. It is obedience, rendered visible. Each woman is a reflection of imperial will, a living offering sculpted by rule, repetition, and fear. A eunuch enters, his gait slow and deliberate, the ring of his bronze keychain cutting the silence. He holds a bamboo scroll in both hands, the knight's order inscribed in neat, black ink. The emperor's choice not a name, but a number. It is never spoken aloud. The chosen woman lowers her head, her face unreadable. Around her, others keep still, their eyes fixed on the ground as if even a glance might be seen as rebellion. Within the Forbidden City, intimacy has been mechanized. Before the emperor's body becomes flesh, it becomes symbol and axis around which heaven and earth are believed to turn. The ritual of the chamber is precise. The emperor bathes in water drawn from a sacred well, then drinks a tonic of ginseng and pearl dust. He is not a man, but the living conduit of cosmic balance. And so, when he lies with a woman, he is performing an act that binds the seasons, steadies the stars, ensures the harvest. Desire has no place here, only duty masquerading as divinity. The eunuchs stand guard at every threshold. Their voices are soft, almost maternal, yet their power absolute. They record the hour, the temperature, the length of the emperor's visit. When he departs, they will note the scent that lingers on his skin, sandalwood or plum blossom, and preserve the linens for inspection. Even the dust of the imperial bed is sacred, stored and sealed in small jars marked with the date. How does one love in a world where the act itself has been nationalized? How does one feel anything when every touch is a matter of state? Beyond the silk screens, a physician kneels in shadow, listening for the emperor's breath, his pulse, his fatigue. It is said that under Emperor Yongle, a doctor once dared to suggest the Son of Heaven rest from knightly obligations. For that impertinence, his tongue was removed. The empire could not afford the suggestion that heaven's vessel might tire like a mortal. The woman chosen tonight moves as if weightless. Her robe is pale green, embroidered with crane symbols of longevity, and the faint scent of magnolia follows her as she enters the chamber. The floor is warm beneath her bare feet, heated by a system of hidden tiles and pipes that whisper with steam. She kneels beside the low couch, eyes lowered. When the emperor speaks, his voice is soft, melodic, shaped by ritual more than emotion. "Do you know why you are here?" Her answer comes like wind through paper. "To serve the order of heaven, Your Majesty." The exchange ends there. He gestures and attendants retreat, closing the lacquered doors with a sound like thunder swallowed by silk. The candles flicker. Outside, the eunuchs wait, their faces calm masks concealing the tension of surveillance. Every creak of wood, every sigh that escapes the walls will be memorized, perhaps reported. Later, the woman will be escorted back through the corridors, her robes gathered, her body inspected, her temperature recorded. The bedding will be burned, replaced by new silk. The act itself will be purified out of existence, leaving only the record clean, bloodless, bureaucratic. The harem was not a place of indulgence, as outsiders whispered, but of control. The emperor's body was watched more closely than any prisoner's. His virility was the empire's currency, and the women, countless, nameless its invisible accountants. A failed conception could be blamed on improper posture, bad incense, or an unworthy womb. And so the rituals became ever more elaborate, as though perfection could be achieved through precision. Once, during the Qianlong reign, a new concubine collapsed mid-ceremony. The attendants rushed to revive her, but the emperor ordered them to stand back. "Heaven decides," he murmured. When she died moments later, her name was erased from the record, as though she had never been chosen, never existed. Only the whispers of the servants kept her ghost alive. Through the centuries, the choreography of power continued, silk replacing silk, generation after generation of women rehearsing the same silent obedience. Even the architecture enforced submission, low doorways that forced them to bow, mirrored walls that reminded them they were always seen. And yet, in rare moments, rebellion flickered a glance held too long, a breath taken too freely. Some say that in those moments the emperor himself felt something dangerously human. Perhaps he feared it most of all. Tonight, the lamps dim. The eunuchs extinguish the incense, sealing the last curl of smoke inside a glass jar. In the darkness that follows, the silence hums not empty, but watchful. Somewhere in that stillness, one woman opens her eyes and realizes that she is not a symbol, nor a vessel, nor a number. For a heartbeat, she remembers her own name. Then, as footsteps approach, she lets it vanish again. The theater of the divine body continues flawless, unbroken, while outside the moon rises over the crimson walls, cold and indifferent, watching everything. The forbidden city sleeps beneath a shroud of dust and silence. Its vermilion gates stand shut, lacquer faded to the dull color of dried blood. Wind sighs through the courtyards once filled with laughter and perfume, carrying instead the scent of rain and old wood. The echoes of silk slippers, the soft hum of court songs, The low murmur of eunuchs announcing names, all of it has vanished. Yet the walls remember. They hold the ghosts of women who were never meant to be remembered. In the years after the fall of the Qing dynasty, travelers describe the palace as both magnificent and mournful, a labyrinth haunted by absence. The last concubines lived like phantoms, their titles stripped, their robes traded for plain cotton. Some were too young to understand what had ended. Others were too old to believe it truly had. They still rose before dawn, still walked in lines to pay respect to a throne that no longer existed. Habit had become religion, and silence, their only prayer. One such woman, known in later writings only as Madame Yi, left behind a journal discovered decades later, its pages thin as moth wings. Her script was careful, the brush strokes faded but steady. "We learned to forget," she wrote, "but the body does not obey. My hands still fold the robe as if waiting for inspection. My feet still stop 3 steps from any doorway." In her lines, the harem survives not as memory, but as reflex, a choreography of control embedded in bone and breath. There are stories of others who turned their survival into something more subversive. A handful fled the capital after the abdication, seeking refuge in remote temples. There, behind veils of incense smoke, they reinvented themselves as nuns, poets, or caretakers of orphaned girls. Some carved tiny poems into the undersides of offering bowls. Others stitched verses into altar cloths using thread so pale it vanished under sunlight. When read aloud, their fragments formed a strange prayer. The body may kneel, but the spirit does not. What is rebellion when it leaves no trace? What does defiance look like when all evidence of it must disappear? In the southern gardens, where once the emperor strolled among peonies and cranes, an old caretaker claimed he could still hear whispers at dusk women murmuring beyond the ponds, their reflections rippling just beneath the surface. He said they were counting, as they always had. Days, rules, steps, breaths. It was not madness. It was memory rehearsing itself. By the 1930s, scholars and photographers entered the Forbidden City as archivists of ruin. They recorded the architecture, the scrolls, the relics, but rarely the stories of the women who had lived there. When asked about the concubines, one historian dismissed them as ornaments of power. Yet, among the dust of their quarters, he found traces that refused to conform to that erasure. A hairpin bent into the shape of a fish, a symbol of freedom in disguise, a wall etched with faint scratches forming the character for moon, and a wooden chest containing a single strand of black silk knotted 13 times, perhaps for each year of confinement. Still, it is through the written word that their ghosts speak most clearly. The late diaries, temple confessions, and half-forgotten testimonies reveal not just suffering, but a strange, quiet brilliance. One account tells of a concubine who, forbidden to write openly, used the rhythm of embroidery to encode entire poems. Another hid histories inside her recipes' measurements that translated to dates, spices to names. In these acts of invisible authorship, the forgotten found a way to remember each other. Centuries later, when restorers began repairing the Palace of Tranquil Harmony, they uncovered a thin layer of paint concealing something unexpected, a mural, faint and unfinished, of women standing in a circle beneath a waning moon. No record mentioned its commission. Some believe a court painter created it in secret, perhaps at the request of one of the women themselves. The faces were blurred, but their gestures unmistakable. Hands clasped, heads tilted upward, eyes open. It was not mourning. It was witness. Even now, the Forbidden City resists full silence. On humid nights, the watchmen say, the scent of magnolia drifts through corridors where no tree remains. Lanterns flicker without wind, and in the Hall of Eternal Calm, footsteps echo across empty marble, stopping always at the same place, the spot where, once, a girl would kneel before entering the emperor's chamber. The empire that sought to control every heartbeat of its women is gone, but the pulse it tried to silence still resonates in strange places, in a temple bell's lingering tone, in the rustle of silk inside museum glass, in the songs old Beijingers hum without knowing their origin. These fragments form a quiet rebellion not loud enough to shatter history, but enduring enough to haunt it. As the final light fades from the palace roof tiles, the moon rises pale, unblinking, ancient. In its glow, the lacquered doors seem to breathe. And if you listen closely, past the hum of the city, past the ticking of time, you might still hear them. The voices of those who were told to vanish, whispering their names back into the world, one by one.